There is a strange moment that happens to many adults, not when they are young, not when they are struggling, but years later. A moment where they stop for a second and quietly realize something unsettling. Nothing in their life is actually wrong. They have a job, they have routines. Their life looks normal from the outside, but something inside them feels frozen, not broken, just unmoving. And what makes this feeling so confusing is that there is no obvious crisis, no disaster, no dramatic failure, just the quiet realization that life somehow stopped progressing without them noticing when it happened. And the reason this happens to so many people is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is something much quieter. A pattern that slowly builds in the background of everyday life, until one day you wake up and realize years have passed, and you are still standing in the same place. Most people believe life becomes stuck because something went wrong. They think stagnation comes from a big mistake, a bad decision, a lost opportunity, a failure they never recovered from. But in reality, most stagnant lives do not begin with a disaster. They begin with something far more ordinary: delay, small delays that feel reasonable at the time. For example, someone tells themselves they will start taking their health seriously once work becomes less stressful. But work never becomes less stressful. Someone else tells themselves they will finally pursue the career they actually want after saving a little more money. But the savings goal keeps moving. Another person tells themselves they will start working on their real ambitions when life becomes more stable. But stability has a strange way of becoming permanent. And none of these decisions feel like giving up. They feel temporary. They feel logical. They feel responsible, which is exactly why they quietly build the foundation for a life that never really changes. Here is the pattern most people never notice. Life rarely becomes stuck because of one large decision. It becomes stuck through hundreds of small ones. Tiny moments where you choose comfort instead of movement, not because you are lazy, but because comfort feels justified. You tell yourself you deserve rest after a long week. You say you will start tomorrow. You say you just need a little more time. And every individual decision seems harmless. Skipping the gym one week, postponing a personal project another week, ignoring the uncomfortable thought that maybe your life is drifting somewhere you never intended. But when these decisions repeat long enough, something subtle happens. Your life slowly reorganizes itself around the path of least resistance. You stop pushing certain goals. You stop questioning certain routines. You stop imagining different possibilities. And eventually, your life reaches a state that feels stable. But that stability is misleading, because it is not the stability of progress. It is the stability of inertia. Imagine someone who once had strong ambitions. Maybe in their early 20s they wanted to start a business, or write a book, or change industries, or move to a different country. At first, they delay the idea for practical reasons. They say they need to focus on their current job first. Then, a few years pass, they become comfortable with their routine. The job is not terrible. The salary is acceptable. Life is manageable. But something interesting happens. The original ambition slowly stops appearing in their daily thoughts, not because it disappeared, but because life quietly filled the space around it. Bills, schedules, responsibilities, social obligations. And eventually, the idea that once felt urgent becomes something they occasionally remember late at night. And when that memory appears, it feels strange, because they realize the only real reason it never happened was time quietly passing while nothing changed. Human beings have a powerful psychological ability, adaptation. It allows people to survive difficult situations, but it also traps people inside comfortable ones. When you live with something long enough, your brain stops questioning it. It becomes normal. This is why people adapt to jobs they never intended to stay in, cities they never planned to remain in, routines they once promised themselves would be temporary. Your brain slowly adjusts your expectations. At first, you notice the gap between the life you imagined and the life you are living. But over time, that gap becomes less visible. Not because it disappeared, but because your mind learned how to ignore it. And once that happens, stagnation no longer feels like stagnation. It feels like ordinary life. This is why the most dangerous kind of stagnation is quiet stagnation. Because nothing looks broken. You are not in crisis. You are not failing publicly. Your life looks functional. But internally, there is a strange sensation, a quiet tension, like something important has been postponed for too long. Many people experience this feeling when they see someone their age doing something they once imagined doing themselves, starting a business, changing careers, moving somewhere new. Suddenly a thought appears. I used to want that too. And for a moment they realize something uncomfortable. The reason it never happened was not a lack of ability. It was that life slowly reorganized itself around safety instead of growth. Avoidance rarely looks like avoidance. It looks like being careful, responsible, practical. But avoidance has a hidden cost. The cost is time, not dramatic losses, just slow erosion. 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Time passing while the structure of your life remains almost identical. And the most painful part is not failure. It is awareness. The moment you realize that if certain decisions had been made earlier, your life might look very different today. That realization does not arrive as panic. It arrives quietly, usually late at night or during long moments of silence. And the thought that appears is difficult to ignore. What if nothing is changing because I stopped demanding change? At some point, many adults experience a turning point, not a motivational breakthrough, but a moment of clarity. They begin to examine their routines honestly. They look at how they spend their evenings, how they spend their weekends, what they prioritize, and what they consistently postpone. And slowly, they see something they did not want to see before. Their life is not being held in place by circumstances alone. It is also being held in place by patterns. Patterns they repeat every week, the same distractions, the same comfortable routines, the same avoidance of uncomfortable action. This realization is heavy because it removes the easiest explanation, the idea that life simply happened this way. But it also reveals something else. If patterns created this life, different patterns can slowly change it. Many people sense this truth but resist accepting it because responsibility removes something comforting: excuses. If circumstances control everything, you are not required to change. But if your habits are shaping your life, then avoiding change becomes a conscious choice. And that is a much harder truth to live with. So many people return to distraction. They fill their time with constant activity, scrolling, streaming, endless information, noise that prevents silence, because silence allows reflection. And reflection often reveals the gap between the life someone is living and the life they quietly wish they had built. This is the quiet reason many lives feel frozen. Not because people lack intelligence, not because they lack potential, but because they adapt extremely well to lives that ask very little from them. Comfort slowly replaces urgency. Routines slowly replace ambition, and once urgency disappears, life stops moving forward. It simply continues. Predictable, stable, familiar, but slowly drifting further away from the version of life that once felt possible. Most people imagine that life changes through dramatic decisions, but real life rarely works that way. Lives change the same way they become stagnant, through small patterns repeated over time, small decisions, repeated quietly, every day. And before any of those changes happen, something else must appear first: clarity. The moment you stop saying your life is stuck and start recognizing the quiet patterns that keep it exactly where it is. Because once you see those patterns clearly, they become impossible to ignore. And sometimes clarity is uncomfortable. But clarity has one advantage comfort never will. It gives you the chance to change direction before more years quietly disappear.